I'm not averse to watching films or TV shows based on books that I would not normally have read. I've seen Room with Brie Larson from before people really knew who Brie Larson was in the same way they do now. And I'm sure there's others that I just can't bring to mind right now. But I was not entirely swayed with the idea of Maid on Netflix. For quite a few months, my partner was trying to make me watch it. I think that's a harsh way of putting it. Trying to convince me to watch it. And I said, like we do sometimes when one of us really wants to watch something that the other one may not entirely be bothered about, we'll give it a few episodes. If I'm not into it, you just watch it on your own. Happy days. It's a standing agreement we have. But after the first few episodes, I needed to watch more. So let's talk about Maid, starring Margaret Qualley, Andy McDowell, Riley Nive Witter. One of those names has definitely been pronounced incorrectly. And Nick Robinson. And I did not realise that was Zach, the older kid from Jurassic World, 6 years or so apart. This was a surprise to me. I thought it was going to be very bleak, very depressing, just, the hardships of a single mother, particularly in the American system, where, from my understanding, and this series hasn't really allayed much of this, there's much less of a support network. The American system overall, for everything, healthcare, etc., is all about, or centered in, capitalism. You don't have a welfare system. You have a system where the government may be able to give you money if you show that you're able to still be productive, which is very capitalist. That's not welfare. You've still got to show that you can work and do everything. It's subsidized, not replacement, except for disability if you're lucky enough to get it, and that's a whole bunch of hoops to jump through as well. We're not amazing over here, but at least we understand our welfare system is a welfare system. It's just that a bunch of people who try to get stuff they're not entitled to ruins it for everyone else who's actually genuinely entitled. But we're not here to talk about welfare systems, specifically. But that's what I was expecting, a very bleak thing. I grew up in primarily a single mother household. We did have my dad around for some bits, and we had a stepdad around for some of it, but for the most part it's been my mother really on her own steam for much of the time. So I know this struggle to a degree. We weren't, as far as I'm aware, and have been told once I've been older, actually homeless in any way, shape or form like this. We always, at least as I say, as far as I can recall, without being contradicted, had a roof over our head and food in our bellies. I always respect that. But it's difficult. There's still hoops to jump through even in a better system to get help and everything. But the fact that a woman who is struggling has to provide evidence that she's bringing in an income to get a roof over her head because she can't afford to get a roof over her head, which she would be able to do if she had an income. The mental gymnastics of that whole thing with Jodie in the office, where she's sort of saying about how the system is and all the forms that have to be filled out. It's just, I was just amazed that it's so broken. I understand making it difficult for, again, people who aren't entitled, who are trying to get something that they're not meant to have. Yeah, great, make it difficult for them. But if it's really clear for any rational, reasonable person outside of the situation to go, oh yeah, you're struggling, there should be a way through. But no, she had to fight tooth and nail. She got into a DV shelter, but didn't feel like she deserved to be there at the beginning. And there was this constant uphill struggle throughout. And like we see in real life, she ended up back where she started. The 8th episode, I think it was this point in time, 7th or 8th episode, was this point in time where I actually said, she's back to square one. Her net progress through this is, okay, she managed to do a maid job, I guess. But once Sean had gotten rid of the car, that went out the window as well. So she was literally back. It's financial and social abuse, it would be considered as, by my understanding of things. She couldn't go out on her own to make her own money and therefore be independent financially, so he's controlling that, thus financial abuse. And emotional abuse, she's stuck there. If he's not around, she can't drive off to a place that anytime she wants. She can't just take her daughter, Maddie, out for a day because he's got the car and he's working 2 jobs and gone back to drinking, which I'm not going to demonize his drinking. I agree with what her father says at a point later on about the fact that alcoholism is a disease. It is a disease. Addiction is a way that people use to cope with things they can't deal with. And alcoholism is just one facet of that. There are a number of different forms of addiction, and most people will have had contact with them if we're not the person who has struggled with some form of addiction. And I like the fact that it doesn't demonize Sean. It only says his behavior is wrong. There are moments where I felt genuine sympathy for him, and that's good writing and good acting. There are moments where I was like, yes, he's trying, and if he goes back to the bar, that's it. It's almost game over, pretty much. I do think to a degree that maybe Alex is a little harsh on her dad, but having had my own share of childhood traumas and issues to deal with, even if that's perceived, not real, to a child, it doesn't matter. It's still processed the same. But to have those things happen to her, I can understand her being very defensive and not wanting her dad around her child. Totally understandable. But of course, that original course, if you will, over the first 7-8 episodes, was practice. And she finally does manage to escape. She gets out of there. She knows exactly, right, get in contact with this wonderful, rich woman who I thought was a complete, I'm not going to use the word she does, but not a nice person, who then has softened over time. And I've realised that even people at that level have their own issues. But this person pulled through for her. She got her a family lawyer who would not have taken money if she could afford it. Got this whole process started. She knew exactly where to go. Managed to get everything sorted and started back on getting back to writing. It's what she wanted to do. She signed up, she had a scholarship, but then child came along, etc. Life took a turn and she just didn't go through with it. She ended up having a very... I guess she was treading water for a few years. She wasn't really living much during that time, if we're honest. And the highlight of it was Maddie. While she wasn't doing much in a grand scheme, at least she never took it out on the child. She appreciates the fact that that child was a gift. She wanted to keep it. Keep her, I guess. She makes all the right steps. She manages to get it sorted and convinces Sean, or through a bad afternoon visitation, Sean realises himself he's not dad material. He needs to get right with himself. But whilst that started out as, you know, you've got a restraining order, you can't come in anywhere near me, it's like, okay, let's deal with this like adults. Once you're settled, come up to Missoula anytime. You can see your daughter. I'm not going to stop you. Just, you've got to be level first. This is a series that deals with people who are flawed, who are trying to deal with other people who are flawed. I guess there's an element of codependency with Alex and Sean. But neither of them would admit it, and neither of them probably know that term. But we see through adversity, Alex is polished to a much more durable form. She can do more. She actually starts this new path of her life with confidence. She gets out of this hole that she's been in. She makes new friends along the way. She gets a new skill set that she didn't know she had. She never would have probably dreamed that she'd be a cleaner. No one starts life. When you ask a kid, what do you want to be when you grow up? No one says a cleaner. But they're a vital part of our ecosystem, I guess. If we didn't have cleaners in offices even, the average person working isn't cleaning the office. I know I didn't when I was doing a 9-to-5 office job. Part of my role wasn't cleaning. We had people in for that job. I will never tolerate people talking down to these people in what are considered lower roles. They're still vital. And for those people who are working high-level jobs, who have got the money, that are just like, I want to come home and chill. I don't want to come home and do all the housework. Great. Get someone like Alex in who will love the money. And like I say, that job got her the contact with Regina, got her the whole situation where she knew it wasn't just bleak. that she could go to Missoula. She could arrange this thing where she could take Maddie with her. She could give her a much better life in Montana. And if I ever moved to the States, somewhere like that would be great. I love open spaces. Big sky country, I believe they call it, you know. I can see why. But she can make a life for this child. And what makes this whole series better is, well, there's a couple of things. And I guess one of them is it really better? But it is based upon the book by Stephanie Land, which was very autobiographical. She had her own issues. She became a single mother. She had to put herself through college and everything like that. She followed a very similar path and ended up putting this book together herself. She wrote, and that's changed her life. And I'm glad of it. A second book is still, I think, in the works from what I've seen. This has hopefully brought a lot more recognition and attention to her when she's really quite early on, I'd say, in her career by all accounts. I really hope that she can get quite far here. I mean, again, it's not necessarily books I would read or get audiobooks of, but there's a market for it, and if Netflix want to option everything she writes, it's a good payday for her. But I think the other big thing I really did love about this was that we had a mother-daughter team up. And apparently behind the scenes there were moments where the boundaries between character and actor were fluid. Because Annie McDowell is the mother of Margaret Qualley. Her father's name is Qualley. In case you're like, but she's not McDowell. That's why. She apparently did dance and then was like, no, I don't want to do that anymore, and has found herself doing acting. I'd forgotten she was in the Death Note adaptation, probably because I like to forget about the Death Note adaptation as much as possible. Lakeith Stanfield was the only really good thing in that, let's all be honest. But yeah, so it was so weird to see this mother and daughter being played by a mother and daughter. Thankfully, Annie McDowell isn't quite this undiagnosed mentally ill. At least I hope not. I don't think so. But she played that so well. Let's take a moment for that. The chaotic energy of... I know she's references like undiagnosed bipolar, but I wouldn't necessarily say it's bipolar per se. I think there might be a schizoaffective element here, which is linked to bipolar, but it's also linked to depression, things like that specifically. So, yeah, schizoaffective disorder might be a better fit, but I'm not a qualified professional. I'm not here to diagnose fictional characters with diseases. There's plenty of other channels out there that'll do that. Either way, she played it very well. I think they were very respectful of the fact that most quote-unquote crazy people don't think they're crazy. They think everyone else is. And I think Annie McDowell portrayed that wonderfully. But I want to finish with another sort of little anecdotal bit, I guess. And the fact that Riley and Margaret Qualley built quite a good relationship, which you'd expect over the time. That scene towards the end where they're in the car singing Shoot was, I was like, I have needed this release. Throughout this whole series, I've needed this moment right here. But there were times where there were scenes where Paula was meant to be shouting at Alex with Riley around, with Maddie around, and Riley was terrified of Andy McDowell for a while. So even though Margaret Qualley was meant to be out of sight, she was actually just holding on to Riley as a form of comfort because she was actually scared of Andy McDowell. I'm guessing from what I've read that kind of faded over time, and obviously from what we see. But this kid's going to go far. But the last thing I did want to quickly nod to as well was the snapping. It's something that I've seen in a couple of other places, and I like it. I actually thought it was a fairly modern invention, but elements of it go back even as far as Roman times. But I think it's more modern boom. I think came in about the 60s, 50s, 60s, where you get the kind of beatnik poets and stuff like that. But you'd often have these poetry readings in very quiet spaces, sometimes even just apartments. So if you have a round of applause after every poem, neighbours are going to complain. But snapping is, of course, a lot quieter. So it was a great way to show appreciation without being super loud. And also you could let the emotions of the poem continue a little without this very harsh sound, but you're still showing appreciation. I thought that it would come about because of maybe, I mean, particularly with them doing it in DV scenarios, I thought it was about giving a quieter experience so that any sharp noises are not going to alarm them. I think it's great for people with any sensory processing issues, whatever that may come from. The most common we think of is ASD, autism spectrum disorders, but even something like fibromyalgia, which is a kind of sensory processing issue in a lot of ways. The nerve signals just either are full on or off, or in some weird state of not needing to be on, but on anyway. Like your check engine light's constantly on and there's nothing wrong with the car. So I get it from that. I'd like to implement it when I'm out as much as possible, because I think it's much calmer. Depending on the atmosphere, I mean, if you're at a massive stadium gig, fine. You're there because you know that kind of noise is there. But I think anything that's not huge scale, let's make snapping normalised. And for those who can't, fine, just a light clap. It's not going to be that bad, just a few people clapping in a sea of clicks, as long as they meter the speed and intensity. Maid was a surprise. It does have very heavy, serious moments. I'm not saying it doesn't. If you're in a good enough place for it, good. If not, it's still going to be there, I'm sure, for when you're ready. Once again, I will leave any relevant things. I liked at the end of episodes they had a link to want to talk about it. I'm not sure if that's global. I'll have found out by the time that I've edited this. And there'll be stuff below if it's necessary. Otherwise, that is a good resource. And for areas where it is valid, of course, use it by all means. But yeah, that's all I want to say about Maid. I really enjoyed it, and it was hopeful in the end at least, and I appreciate that. So thank you very much for watching, and of course, take care.